Aeroflot Flight 1492, which was scheduled to take off on May 5, 2019, from Moscow's Sheremet Diego Airport, had 73 passengers and 5 crew members. However, during the pre-flight check, the pilots lined up the wrong way. At 18:03, the plane began its climb. After 5 minutes, a massive boom occurred. In less than 30 minutes, an emergency landing resulted in the deaths of 41 people as the autopilots failed as well. Let's figure out why it's never a good idea for travelers to remove their luggage from an aircraft after an emergency landing, and why this action claimed the lives of 41 out of 78 persons on board a flight. Aeroflot Flight 1492 was planned to depart from Sheremet Diego Airport in Moscow and arrive at Murmansk Airport in Russia on May 5, 2019. 5 crew members and 73 passengers were accommodated on the airplane. At 18:03, the pilots finished the pre-flight inspections, positioned the aircraft on the runway, and started the takeoff. There was some turbulence on the ascent, but nothing to worry about because they had been in worse situations previously. But 5 minutes later, there was a huge explosion that jolted the entire aircraft. The autopilot stopped working and the main radio stopped working. The pilots were unfazed by these electrical problems and thought it was a small problem. They had no idea that in 30 minutes everyone's lives would be in jeopardy. However, it wasn't entirely the result of what the pilots did. The passengers' dangerous choices would be the source of the impending danger. At flight level 106, or roughly 10,600 feet or 3,200 meters, the aircraft ceased its ascent, and ATC sent it in the direction of Sheremetyevo. Before aligning for the approach to runway 24L, it completed a right orbit. The captain guided the approach manually while the crew engaged the instrument landing system. The aircraft weighed 43.5 tons, 43,500 kilograms, 96,000 pounds at the glide slope, which was 3,500 pounds over the allowable landing weight. The captain tried to get in touch with the controller at 15:18:53 UTC to ask for a holding area, but the controller's recorder did not capture his message. The flaps were lowered to the prescribed 25 degrees in direct mode, which is the landing angle for an overweight aircraft. A 50-degree crosswind was causing the wind to blow from 190 degrees at 30 knots, 56 kilometers per hour, 35 miles per hour, and 15 miles per second. The speed stabilized at 155 knots, 287 kilometers per hour, or 178 miles per hour. The warning for predicted wind shear sounded often between 100 feet, 340 meters, and 900 feet, or 270 meters. This warning was not acknowledged on tape by the crew. The aircraft started to veer below the glide slope as it descended through 260 feet or 79 meters, and the glide slope audible alert went out. The speed increased to 164 knots, 304 kilometers per hour or 200 miles per hour at 16 feet 4.9 meters AGL. This was 17 miles per hour over the required approach speed, even though the airline's own flight operations manual gives pilots a margin of -5 to +20 kg as a criterion for stabilized approach. The captain called an advisory and increased engine thrust. The captain made multiple large, alternating side stick inputs as he lowered the thrust to idle for the flare, resulting in pitch variations between +6 and -2 degrees. The side stick went from full aft to full front in 0.4 seconds, coinciding with the touchdown. Even though the spoilers were armed, they were not manually extended, and automatic spoiler deployment is restricted in direct mode. The plane bounded to a height of 6 feet, 18 meters. The captain held the side stick firmly forward, attempting to produce maximum reverse thrust at the same time. When the aircraft is in flight and there is no weight on its wheels, reverse thrust and reverser door deployment are restricted, and the reverser doors only open on the second touchdown. The reverse thrust did not engage, and the aircraft lifted off the ground before the reverse door cycle was finished. The second touchdown, which happened nose first, 2 seconds after the first, happened at 155 knots, 287 kilometers per hour, and with a 5.85 gram vertical load. The primary landing gear, weak links shear. The weak links are made to shear under extreme strain to reduce wing damage and preserve wing integrity while enabling the gear legs to move forward and backwards. The plane bounced up to a height of 4.6 to 5.5 meters, or 15 to 18 feet. The side stick was dragged fully aft in a potential attempt to turn around. The reverser doors started to close, and the thrust levers were advanced to take off power until the reverser doors were closed, and a third hit was recorded at 140 knots, or 260 kilometers per hour, or 160 miles per hour. And with a vertical load above 5G, the thrust was not permitted to rise. Fuel leaked out of the wing tanks when the landing gear disintegrated and penetrated the wing. The wings, Back fuselage and empennage all caught fire. Auxiliary power unit and aft cargo hold fire alarms went out in the cockpit. At 15:30 UTC, the aircraft slid down the runway, swung to the left, and came to a stop in the grass between two taxiways that adjoined the runway, nose upwind. At 15:31 UTC, the engine's power was turned off. Data from the flight recorder indicates that following the final hit, control over the engines was lost. 3 seconds ahead of the orders, the cabin crew started the evacuation. 8 seconds after the airplane stopped, the forward right exit was opened and the first passenger was evacuated after 17 seconds. After assistance from another passenger, the forward left exit opened in 18 seconds and the first passenger left at 32 seconds. According to Tatiana, the passengers were pushed out onto the slide after the door was kicked open. Passengers with their cabin baggage were observed in the cabin, according to the cabin personnel. Black smoke was rising swiftly from the cabin, and some people were crawling in the direction of the exits. The aircraft's front slides were still being used for evacuation after 70 seconds. Along with the commander and the 2 cabin crew members at the front of the aircraft, 34 passengers were able to escape. Using the flight deck escape route, the first officer was able to flee. Maxim lost his life while attempting to unlock the aircraft's back evacuation door to let his passengers out. 41 travelers perished. There was 1 flight crew member, 1 cabin crew member with minor injuries, and 1 critical cabin crew member. Verifies that passengers were disembarking from the airplane and sliding down the slides with their belongings. There is no doubt that this caused avoidable deaths and delays in the evacuation process. It is believed that in these conditions, the crew and passengers toward the back of the aircraft would not have had a chance of surviving. The commander was accused of violating flying manuals and regulations by Russian courts in December 2019. Air traffic control was not asked to actively avoid storms by the pilots. Still, they started the second part of the escape earlier than was advised, turning right away from the storm. During an orbiting maneuver in a 40-degree bank, the pilot struggled to maintain altitude in manual flight and deviated more than 200 feet 61 meters from his designated altitude, resulting in repeated audible alerts. The crew failed to select the go-around altitude and failed to complete the approach checklist and approach briefing. The pilot increased engine thrust when the aircraft veered below the glide slope and descended through 270 feet or 82 meters above sea level. This caused the aircraft to accelerate to 15 knots or 28 kilometers per hour over the required approach speed. The side stick inputs during landing were sudden and irregular, with sweeping pitch movements and large amplitude movements that were not seen during conventional flight law approaches but were comparable to the direct flight law approaches made by other Aeroflot pilots. According to the assessment, the pilots ignored a wind shear warning, which, if true, would have required a go-around. Investigators discovered evidence of lightning strikes on the cockpit windows, exit lights, antennae, and a variety of sensors. After re-examining the landing gear design, investigators discovered that it complied with certification standards. The study included information from Sukhoi that said that modern certification standards did not take into account the impact that the airframe would have on the ground following the removal of the landing gear. The accident survival variables were not examined in the interim report since it said that the analysis was ongoing and would be covered in the final report. In a May 2022 progress report commemorating the accident's 3rd anniversary, the IAC stated that it planned to release the draft final report soon. Numerous aircraft systems have been examined. However, due to intellectual property concerns, the investigators are unable to access part of the decrypted data from the Curtiss-Wright fire protection units. If you enjoyed this video, kindly hit the subscribe and like button for more. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you will be notified when we upload new videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.